Hello, and welcome to a conversation about technology with the President of the BCS, Mayank Prakash, brought to you by the Consultancy Specialist Group of the BCS.
Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
He's going to be telling us a little bit more. We have the opportunity to. He has been in the industry for quite long. He's the president of the BCS, and he has an impressive history. I'm going to let you talk a little bit more about yourself. But the idea is that after you introduce yourself, probably we will bring it to the audience, and there are a few areas that we will see of interest that we will put them later where we can expand. So just want to give you the word to talk a little bit about yourself.
Well, we've been here a long time talking about it. Look, on a serious note, my name is Mayank Prakash, and I am a technologist, simply put. I'm incredibly lucky to be born at a point in time where technology has the opportunity to change the future of mankind. And so technology is both my profession and my hobby. At work, I lead large-scale digital transformations, run ops and tech teams, or I'm the non-exec on the board of Uber, and a non-exec on the board of a fund solutions business. So financial services, Uber, and BCS, basically. Actually, what defines me is not that. I'd introduce myself as a technologist, as the father of a 21-year-old daughter who is studying medicine. She's in fourth year medicine, and as the husband of a computer engineer who switched her career to teaching. And my wife teaches is the deputy head teacher of a school in Northwest London. And as somebody who loves to trek and just explore the possibilities of technology. So that's me.
Thank you very much, Mayank. Good. So we have the several areas of interest that we thought that could be interesting. Mayank has been part of very big transformation project, or digital transformation project. Because of that, we have a few areas that could be interesting. Also, we have many disruptive areas in technology that are disrupting today, like artificial intelligence. Now we have GDPR. So I'm just going to go and ask the first questions. But before going myself, I'm just going to ask to the people that are here in the audience online to put your questions on the chat, and we will follow up. The first question that I'm going to go for is, we can see technologies like, for example, automation or artificial intelligence. And during the last years, we have been suffering COVID. We have been suffering a recession. And I see some fear of people that thinks that jobs are going to be displaced by artificial intelligence and things like that. My question is, in consultants, or in IT consultants, what do you think will be the trends? What do you think a consultant, an IT professional, should be in their arsenal of tools to get ready to this era where we're going to see that artificial intelligence, machine learning, a bigger impact on all that in the society?
Yeah, so let me take a step back and then take a step forward. If you look back at the last few decades, we first started seeing evolutions of technology with multiple generations of programming languages. Computing infrastructure went from mainframe to distributed. The internet came, and acceleration happened from there on. Because if you look at the pace of change, it has fundamentally accelerated from there on. And there are two reasons why it has accelerated. One, the ubiquitous browser, and second, the ability to leverage large-scale infrastructure. And the combination of the two resulted in data being the hotspot And data aggregation happened. You remember that wave. Now we're in the wave of how can we make machines learn. Notice I don't use the word intelligence. Intelligence for me is what the baby tortoise is when, and this is a true story, I have a baby tortoise that my daughter bought a few years back, and it demonstrated intelligence because this was a baby hatchling of a tortoise, and I put it on a tabletop, and it started crawling, went up to the edge, looked down, stopped, and came back. Never in its life had it experienced that scenario, but it intuitively had the intelligence to know if it drops, that's going to not be good for it. Machines can't do that. That very simply is intelligence. One of the things we suffer from in the tech industry is hype. Every piece of software that you look at, everybody who's marketing describes themselves as an AI piece of kit. I would offer to you, in the spirit of straight talking, none of it is AI. What we have is machine learning, and machines are learning. Generative models with things like ChatGPT are pushing the boundaries of machines and their ability to learn. All they have is the ability to generate content based on preset algorithms. That is all we have today. We need to be honest about that. And as consultants, we need to be honest about it, because if we sell hype and overhype the expectations, we actually let down the clients when we get to achieving business outcomes. So honesty is the first premise of being a good consultant. The second premise I would offer is to understand what is the business outcome of the problem you're trying to solve. I'm a technologist, so I love technology, but technology for technology's sake is not useful. Technology to achieve a business outcome is incredibly powerful. And the amazing opportunity we have is that technology is transforming almost every business. It doesn't matter whether it's the retail bakery, the corner street near where I live, or whether it is the garage at the end of my street, which is thinking, how long am I going to be repairing ICE combustion engines? Because electric vehicles are increasing. Or whether it's the retailer, Sainsbury, down the road, thinking how many people are going to walk in and how do we do delivery, or whether it is a business that entrepreneurs want to set up. Every entrepreneur today is by default setting up a tech business. Technology is by default part of every business. And so there is an opportunity for technology to change and reimagine how every business operates. And that is every consultant's opportunity. It is to reimagine business outcomes using technology. And generative AI is a huge opportunity, but we're just scratching the beginning of that. I give you a couple of things that are exciting about ChatGPT from my perspective. Its ability to demonstrate what a generative model is absolutely making people go curious. The other day I typed in and composed a romantic song for my wife in the style of, I leave that blank. My privacy is important for me, so I won't share that bit with you. I had composed a song, which was fantastic. It is not what we human beings expect machines to do. But actually, it's quite primitive, because you can ask it to do really dangerous things, or you can ask it a sarcastic question and it doesn't understand. Because it cannot distinguish between sarcasm and normal language. It cannot distinguish between what is right and wrong. So you can ask it really, really unreasonable questions which are not good for society, and let him to answer them. And so that's an example of these technologies are in their infancy. But there are lots of good examples. I use, and I see marketing companies now use photos that are generated. You can create human photos. You can choose how tall, well, you want that person to be, and it'll generate an image for you. It's totally custom generated. Such a person doesn't exist in the world, and it looks near real. And so these things are transforming industries, because imagine if you were in the business of having copyright photos. Well, your business is totally going to be transformed if it hasn't already. And that means new possibilities, and new possibilities are opportunities for consultants to create value. And that's the business that consultants are in.
That's exactly. What are the possibilities in this new era? How a consultant can change, can be. So I'm just going to go back to one thing, which is how IT can be better for society, how we can make good for society. We are in the BCS, so that is our slogan, right? So what will have in their arsenal a consultant to actually make better? So you keep with the ethics. You mentioned before, you should not fit the hype, but what are also the ways, the things that maybe a consultant should be looking after in terms of trends, so we can have a better impact in society?
Great question. I start first with a very simple thing that I've seen around the world as I've had the privilege to travel and watch different industries. I learned this out of watching how Lego works in Copenhagen, and one of the Lego has a school there, and it's a very creative school where they are trying new forms of education. And when I was getting curious about what's different about this school, they had just one answer, which is we want everybody to walk out of the school learning what they like and knowing their craft. And I'd start there. If we want to make IT good for society, my first invitation for everyone, and it applies equally to me, is learn what you like and know your craft. Because if you don't know your craft, you can actually bullshit your way through. Because there's so many people who don't know how to use technology to actually create things. But you're on thin ice. You're not going to achieve your potential, and you're not going to make IT good for society. And so know your craft. Be good at what you do. And if you know your craft, and you're not just a messenger with people who know their craft, whatever that craft may be, it may be user experience design, it may be business analysis, it may be service journey design, it may be product management, it may be being a project manager, it may be running scale infrastructure, it may be running infrastructure as code. Whatever that craft is, know it. And keep learning, because every few years, technology offers new possibilities. I had a humbling experience several years back. I talking to a group of early careers grads who were being inducted, and I was talking to them about how I was a deep expert in VLSI semiconductor chips. And one of those audience members, rightly so, put me in my place to say, 7 years is the life cycle. Anything beyond 7 years is history and is obsolete. And they were absolutely right. And so if you're not learning every few years, you're becoming obsolete. And so avoid doing that. That'd be my first learning to share. The second thing to say is life won't be perfect as a consultant as you go and do implementations. Just be open. Nobody expects anybody to be perfect. But it is when we set expectations that we can't meet that we have disappointments. Once you gain credibility in any organization, in any service that you're providing, with that authenticity, with that honesty, and you know your craft, you then have the opportunity to do it the right way, better than what everybody is doing. And that means looking after security, not just delivering solutions, looking after making sure they are secure, to protect the value that you're creating, and then going further, looking after, is it ethical? Is it accessible? Does it respect privacy? And these things are much easier said by me than actually done. You with one provocative thought that there is little difference between the Chinese state using data to actually control what happens in society and the Western tech giants. Because the Western tech giants do exactly the same thing to make money.
Really, really interesting thought. I'm just going to park it there. I'm going to go with my colleague Alan. Alan, do we have any questions so far online?
We have no questions online yet, but I think they're coming.
Okay, good. I'm just going to ask a question, and is anyone else happy to? I will go ahead, and maybe we can have anyone who will let him in. I just want to ask about digital transformation again. We are in the fourth revolution of industry, right? We are Industry 4.0. The first one was the steam engine, then we have diesel engine, communications, and now we have surrounded by all this world. On your view, where we are, where we going to see more challenges in digital transformation, where we going to see more opportunities? Do you think that is going to be a mass adoption of digital transformation, or do you think that we're going to be finding niche markets or niche scenarios? I think you were mentioning something before related to that. So what do you think is where we are? How do you feel we are in that digital transformation or in that industry 4.0? And where do you think we're going to find more opportunities?
The first fascinating bit for me, if you look across the revolutions, as they're called, and we describe this as 4.0 revolution, is that this is different because this is software driven. There's a fundamental difference between the pace of velocity of software driven transformations to non-software driven. Let me give you a simple example. If you're manufacturing a car and you had a new part that you need to get out, and you were Toyota and you needed to do that for cars that you had sold across the world, the number of years it would take for you to actually get those parts back and get the new version of the part back out is years. But with software, it can iterate 5 times today. And if I can distribute it 5 times today, the pace of change just accelerates. So physical transformations, which is what happened in all previous revolutions, did not have the same pace that software-based transformations. Now, the second thing to say is it's true that every business, every vertical, doesn't matter which vertical you are in, is impacted by digital transformation. It's also true that the pace of transformation has exceeded the capability of the managers. Because in any organization, doesn't matter which industry you look at, you have people who don't understand how technology can be used to reimagine what they do. And I see digital transformations follow a predictable 3-part pattern almost in every industry. It starts with change at the edge. Let's create a website. Let's do some online commerce. Let's do some online interaction. It's what I call touching the edge. Then it starts. Then the next phase is there are some collisions which happen with the core. Doesn't matter which industry it is. If it is looking at let's pick an industry. If it's looking at shipping, then there'll be some collision with the core to say, well, our big problem is we have lots of packets of documentation that need to go with the cargo and be there at the other end for customs. can we solve that problem? It's an example of collision with the core. And then the third phase is you reinvent the core. Because if your business becomes technology driven, the traditional boundaries of the value chain up and down are gone. You have the opportunity to expand up and down, or you have the opportunity to explore fundamentally new businesses, as Amazon's done recently in US by saying that they'll offer a $5 per month service for anybody to get common drugs. Doesn't matter what drug it is, you get it for free, $5 service. Now, did you and I imagine that when Amazon was selling books not too long back, they'd be launching a healthcare $5 per month, take any drug service? Well, why are they doing it? They're doing it because they have the data, they have the customer relationships, they have the ability to ship, and they have the ability to now disrupt retail pharmacies and the margins of a retail pharmacy because they don't have that overhead. That is how value chains get disrupted. And we are just at the first phase, the first quartile of that disruption across every industry. Now, if you were a pharmacy, you were certainly not expecting Amazon to disrupt you 10 years back, but that's here today.
Does anyone have any follow-up questions in there?
Thank you. I just wanted to explore a little bit more about what you just said, because I think one of the challenges of digital transformation is kind of where it fits in wider transformation, and just your thoughts on the challenges of behaviour change and the speed of decision making, because you can do digital transformation, but if the rest of the organisation or culture or ecosystem doesn't come with it, you've got this clash, haven't you?
You do. And so I have often debated this. I don't know the right or wrong answer, but I'll share with you my view, which is if you're trying to change an organization from within, you can only incrementally change it. You're not going to radically reimagine it. That's my lived experience. If you have to radically reimagine it, you need to incubate outside an established ecosystem. Doesn't matter what that established ecosystem is. You can, of course, incrementally make it better. Of course, you'll automate it a bit. Of course, you will stitch data and move data to the left and make it slightly better. Of course, you may make client onboarding slightly better. But you want to radically reimagine it, you've got to set it up from outside. Well, one of the conversations we were having earlier was about financial services. You look at why has no major bank been able to set up a neobank? Why is it? They don't have the money. They don't have the technologies. They don't have the consultants. Which one is it? Go on.
Listening to a podcast today from he runs Visa and the financial tech. He said, financial services industry, the issue isn't a financial cloud. It's how much money are they willing to invest in the technology they use currently to onboard clients or to actually explain to clients the day-to-day usage. And she was explaining about how pensions and how much there's a lack of financial investors in terms of using technology with regards to key day-to-day issues such as pensions or ISAs. There isn't that merge between having proactive financial technology rather than just waiting to change when there's a regulation change. That's just one answer she made.
Yeah, and I would agree. Most organizations are running a business model, and so the management of that organization is incentivized to monetize that business model. Reimagining that business model requires risk-taking, requires entrepreneurship, requires the ability to incubate a new business, and that is not what risk mitigation management is set up to do, because traditional management is set up to minimize risks. It is to predict the outcomes. I remember being a manager and being told, the good answer is not that you exceeded your revenue number by 20% or that you saved 20% money, but that you came on target, because the share price is going to be punished by shareholders if you're not predictable. Doesn't matter whether you're good or bad, you need to be predictable. But that's what organizations are working to. If you want to truly innovate, you've got to come out of it. Which is why, our ChatGPT set up by OpenAI doesn't happen inside a Microsoft. Which is why a DeepMind is at arm's length from a Google, even though there's no shortage of computer engineers at Google. And so if you want to truly transform, you've got to incubate outside and then bring that incubation, once it's grown enough, back in again. That, I think, is the only scalable way of doing transformation that is truly transformative. I'd make one more observation, which is, I use a remote as an example. Not everybody who uses a remote needs to know how to create one. And one of the things we consultants need to master is to talk to users about how to use a remote, not to talk to them about how we manufacture one. And we need to have a split life, which is we need to know how to construct a remote, but we don't need to tell every user of the remote how to construct one. They just need to know how to use it. We need to make it so user-friendly. And thanks to Apple, I'll speak for myself, design thinking is now core to our profession. When functionality trumps, or user experience trumps functionality any day. This was more interesting before Donald Trump became interesting. You get my point.
So you just touched upon this design thinking. And I was wondering about GDPR under both the US or UK. I think now with the advent of AI, I mean, not AI, but OpenAI rather, and ChatGPT precisely, do you think their governments should also focus on introducing or establishing new policies that will kind of regulate these big tech companies, especially? I think OpenAI also is going to become one of the big tech companies over time, because what they do is through CRM processes, including collecting our consent forms, right? Anyway, I think that the government should be also concerned about and kind of regulate. And how do you think this will affect these companies over time? Because as far as Facebook is concerned, for example, under certain articles within GDPR, they are being fined all the time for their, but it's a very small portion of money. So, like, for example, Facebook was fined by 400 million, if I'm not wrong, and it's not a big amount for Facebook, right, for Meta. And do you think those type of regulations can hinder companies like that are emerging, like OpenAI, to further grow? So
yeah, and a very poignant question. And look, I'm not going to pretend to know what the right answer is, but it's clear to me, and in conversations that I have with governments around the world who look for expertise from BCS, it's clear to me that there's a balance needed between encouraging innovation and regulation. Now, where that line is drawn is hotly debated. And if you're on the right, if you have a view, which is an activist view of freedom and open markets are the best way to decide what the right answer is, and you have to go see some of the underbelly of this conversation, because there is real harm that can be caused by totally unregulated environments, whether it is to protect children with content that can persuade them to do things which are really harmful for them, or whether it is to use data in a way that is totally unexpected by that person who's contributed that data, or whether it is to use data to actually sell it on to third parties and make money out of that. Ethics of how these services are provided is important to get right. In the world of AI, that is particularly important to get right. Who has the right to use the picture that is being captured as I walk in my street in front of my neighbor's house who has a video camera on it? That's an interesting question. Most people would say they didn't give that right to someone else. Whereas that if you're using a Ring doorbell, that video service is in terms and conditions not owned by the owner of that Ring doorbell. It is owned by Amazon. Now, is that ethical? And you tell me. I'm not going to pretend to know the answer, but I think there is the need for regulation to actually draw some guardrails. But there's also the need to have freedom of innovation, because we're just exploring the possibilities of what these technologies can do. And crime is a reality on all of these platforms. Crime is an absolute current reality. And if you go talk to, say, for example, the National Cybersecurity Center or the National Crime Agency, you see how technologies are used for perpetuating large-scale crime. And that is not what technologists who created those technologies set out to do. That's the unintended consequence of their actions, which needs regulation as well.
My question,
It's okay, so go ahead.
my question touched back to the new kind of innovation we have, rather the software based and the hardware based. And actually, as a great connection to regulatory panel as well, is that back in when one could buy a mainframe from the market and buy a piece of code, there was really no dependency on the mainframe manufacturer per se, because it could have been substituted for any other minor changes. But nowadays, what I see is that more and more companies are ditching the hardware side, which is of course costly to maintain, so it's much easier to outsource it. But these tech giants who have all the cloud infrastructure nowadays develop technologies that make vendor lock-in a real concern here. So, for example, OpenAI, without Microsoft, if Microsoft says, okay, I'm not going to sell my cloud services to you anymore, it totally can do. But OpenAI is basically a piece of useless software which is configured to run in Azure. So, wouldn't you think that there's actually a weird way now in which regulators actually can encourage innovation by forcing these platforms to unify and stay relatively open instead of hindering it?
Yeah, so the standards are really important. And bodies like BCS drive those standards because we are apolitical and non-commercial. Standards are being driven out of commercial necessity as well, because you can only grow so far in a siloed world. But regulation is also necessary to actually create a level playing field. And we have good regulation and to make sure competitive markets are in place in UK, in Europe, in US, in Japan. We have good regulation that creates competitive markets going. And there is ethics regulation that is coming in as well. Both in European Union and in US, it is ahead of where we are in UK. It's still early days, but I think there is the space, to your point, for standards and regulation to make sure that we don't have lock-ins to prevent innovation from happening. And equally, some of these investments are large-scale investments and they need a return. It's a bit like the metaphor of patents in the past. Remember, if you do an invention, you'd have a patent which would grant you with some exclusivity for X years. That's what happened with the pharmacy industry, with generating new drugs that they will test. A huge amount of investment would go into making sure the drug was right, but then they would have X years of locking. Beyond that, it needs to become open. And the same thing needs to happen in the tech industry as well. My last observation would be competitive market pressures are driving that change. Look, the reality is most large financial services institutions will not get locked into one cloud provider. And so there are now plenty of services that are available which are cloud agnostic layer on top, which allow you to migrate loads from one provider to another. And they are there because the lack of an open standard, so they've built a bridge.
Want to move first online, and then we'll go back to the people in the room.
We have about 20 people online, and Michael's asking a question, which is how will the BCS change as the digital world changes?
Michael, great question. And it is one that our new CEO, Ashik Palmer, and the executive team have been thinking about. BCS has been behind the curve in adopting technology and digitalizing itself. And you know this better than I do. We're all users of BCS. It's what I call the cobbler syndrome. We tell the world what to do, but in our own backyard, we're not that good. And in the recent past, we are shaking that up. And I think that's a welcome thing. Doesn't matter whether it is setting up virtual sessions or it is making BCS a pioneer in how to moderate standards, ethics, and regulation and roundtables that BCS is playing a bigger part in, or in digitalizing the interaction with BCS for members. The reality is we need to go beyond setting up things like this. We need to use open platforms and apps. And I'm delighted BCS is working on an app. It's rethinking its basic infrastructure to get to next generation and digital capabilities in how it enables collaboration across professionals in the community. More to come on this in the coming year, but I know that's one of the initiatives that Rashik is driving. If you have suggestions on what BCS should do, I'm sure Rashik would welcome them. Just write to him.
Thank you. Thanks.
Michael, do you have any follow-up? Does Mayank has answered your question? You can unmute yourself if you want.
Yeah, that was perfect. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Let's go for another one. If you said that you have about 20.
Another question is coming from Ashok, which is that technology has become very important in healthcare as well as health R&D. Learning from COVID period, how do we better prepare for the next global health event?
I think if there is any healthcare professional, get close to CRISPR, understand what therapy and gene engineering looks like, because I think that looks really promising. I personally have been tracking that for a few years, and it is going places as for healthcare. I think we will reimagine healthcare as it exists today, with whether it's CRISPR or something else with genetic engineering, and that is quite fundamentally transformative. I also think that there are a whole bunch of new technologies that are coming into medicine because a combination of data aggregation to know what is the right answer, devices that are now becoming miniaturized with sensors, with variables. I mean, I wouldn't have 10 years back said to you that I'm going to have a watch which is going to take ECG every 10 minutes. I now wear one without thinking about it. And so that is the reality of variables and sensors. As data and privacy issues get sorted, that becomes aggregated. And now my GP has the ability to see that data aggregated over a period of time, which a number of GPs are beginning to offer around the world, and 2 trusts in UK are trialing. Now that fundamentally reimagines healthcare services. And my last observation would be that surgery is getting transformed as well. And surgery is getting transformed because you have the ability to do with motor or robots. I'm talking about physical robots here rather than virtual robots, what just was not possible. And while we have all seen the commercial and demonstrators of those with Boston Dynamics, say for example, we've seen the dog that jumps backwards. Well, those things are now robots that are available. They're available for surgery, but they're also available for assistance. Mainstream products are very visible, like exoskeletons, which we can wear. And a number of industries have got exoskeletons now established as a way of working to actually improve the power that we as human beings bring to our jobs physically. But the reality is, Obama did a fist bump many, many years back with a person who felt that fist bump without having an arm. And so these sensors and these technologies are fundamentally going to reimagine healthcare. And what a good thing that is, because it explores the possibility of what disabled people can do. It explores the ability of disabled people, and that is a fantastic thing for society.
It's like Neuralink, these other technologies that they are focusing on being able to move with your mind, whatever you can, right? So you can have a bionic arm that is not moved with anything else but with your mind.
Yes.
I just want to connect something that you mentioned before with this, and I'm going to give here. I really like mention that you did before that for cultural changes to radical changes, we need to experience it from without, not within. So we can see that one of the challenges that we have seen in healthcare for a long time has been disaggregated data. If you go to A&E, they don't have your patient record. And now we can see that tech giants are getting all this data and they're doing it without. So they get the kind of patient record. So just connecting the dots.
Yeah, that's true. And look, there are services here today in UK like Babylon, which are now offering private GP services. So you can connect your data up to them. And that's going to be a pressure point. It, by the way, is also an NHS recognized GP. And so you can have it on NHS, you can have it privately, and these services are going to push the boundary. But they come with all kinds of new issues, back to ethics, DNA testing, readily available. Well, careful. If you give your DNA, the unintended consequences of that, I encourage you to Google.
I will go back to that because that's a really interesting point, but I want to give the room first to the gentleman on the back. I think you had a question before.
Yes, I did have a question. My name is Solomon. I just wanted to ask a brief question in relation to, well, just employment in general, but I just wanted to ask basically, like, in terms of employment with the IT sector, I just wanted to ask you, like, in terms of like the experience, salary, in terms of like, so what would you recommend is the best sort of like employment you would do for someone who's like an entry level or intermediate person who goes into the IT business? So I previously worked in IT before, in IT support before, with a bank, with another company in Hatfield. So I just wanted to ask you personally, so what would you recommend is the best sort of job would you go into as a beginner for IT, for example? What would you recommend?
Well, I'm not so sure there's one size that fits all as a recommendation, but I'd encourage you to go do something that you like doing. I fundamentally believe one cannot be good at one's job if you don't like doing it. And so, look, I'm not going to be the best person at drilling oil. I don't like it. And so you got to first do what you like, and then second, learn. And the barriers are really low. I mean, I give you an example. In mentor some students who are coming through GCSEs. And today, programming is JavaScript. It is very close to English language, the closest it has ever gone. And so some of those GCSE students and their ability to code is because JavaScript languages are so easy to adopt and use, they can churn out apps at a fascinating rate. And you don't need to be a deep expert. Frankly, coding on scripting in languages doesn't need deep expertise. If you love art, designing the products, it doesn't need you to, there's no barrier. You don't need to be a person who understands technology deeply or spend 7 years learning a technology. That's not necessary anymore. The barriers to entry are really, but there's no right or wrong answer. Look, if somebody really enjoys interacting with clients, interacting with users, support is a brilliant job. And I love the days when and I still do it, when I go out and take service desk calls, because or just walk the floor, or just talk to a focus group of clients. I mean, there is no substitute for interacting with people, because we as human beings are fundamentally social. And we can work without that interaction. We can interact with each other on Zoom, but let's not pretend that Zoom or I'm not picking on Zoom or any one of these video conferencing technologies is a substitute for meeting people face to face. It isn't. Did I answer your question or did I not?
Yeah, I think that's an essential answer. Yes. So thanks for answering my question for that. Thank you, sir.
Going to jump to the lady in front.
Yes, thank you for the talk. It's been fascinating to listen to you. My name is Dino. My first question would be about going back to the radical change from outside. When we discuss digital transformation within governmental public institutions, would you also recommend that change is applied from the outside? And then my second question would be in regards to lock-in for innovations. What are the types of, what are the nature of the lock-ins that you're alluding to? And if you can just elaborate further on that.
Sure. So let's do the first one, public services, and can you do radical transformation from outside? Yeah. The best example in the world is what DARPA is doing in US. Because if you look at the new technologies and the innovation that comes out of DARPA incubated project going back decades, and they have totally reimagined industries. That has happened as a result of incubation from outside. Another good example, and public sector is a big user of innovation in technology products now. In the UK in particular, the public sector is innovating at some pace, and some of our digital services are quite unified thanks to the gov.uk flattening and the gov.uk unification of the user experience that was done about a decade back. Another good example is startups. I find it fascinating to watch how venture capital firms like Insight Partners, which is the world's largest software venture capital firm, tracks startups. There are hundreds of thousands of startups, and they can track them to see how much traction are they getting with their idea. The ability to go from idea to actually implementing that idea successfully to getting enough of a client base. And you'd be surprised there are thousands of startups disrupting across industries. And all of that is coming back into every sector, including the public sector. Whether it is reimagining how MOT is done or how identity is done in the public sector, they're all being reimagined because of innovation happening across industries. And so the public sector has plenty of opportunities to innovate from outside, and there are several good examples of that across governments around the world. Singapore is another great example of how the government of Singapore incubates its reimagining a public service outside that particular department or service, and then brings it back in, tries it and brings it back in. The second point about lock-ins and what am I alluding to is the point that was being made earlier, that these platforms are very attractive, and sometimes the ramp into these platforms is a freemium model. We offer it to you for free, come play with it. It's to offer clients a lollipop, and then that results in you taking your data and implementing it on a platform. The ability to move that data and that service from that platform to another platform is a prohibitively expensive cost or disruption. And that inherently is the lock-in on all of these platforms. And I suspect that's where that conversation was going earlier. That's the reality with cloud providers. And that's how they make money. Nothing wrong with that. Money can spur innovation, but you've got to choose. If you are adopting one of these platforms, doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter whether it's an ERP platform you implement or whether it is a CRM platform you're implementing or whether it is ESG platform you're implementing as a financial services firm. Every technology solution you implement has some degree of lock-in. But I would offer to you that the biggest lock-in as consultants you're going to face is the inertia in the organizations that you're transforming. Because once human beings get used to a way of working, changing that habit to implement something else is actually very difficult for human beings to adjust.
Good. Just going to check, do we have anything online?
Okay, at the moment.
I'm going to go first with Simon, then we go to
So I think you broadly answered this question in your previous answers, but what advice would you give to a head of digital transformation working internally within an organisation, somebody leading a digital transformation internally within an organisation? Bearing in mind what you said about inertia and the challenges.
Yeah. First be clear on what is the problem you're solving. Because if you know what is the problem you're solving, and if there is wide buy-in for solving that problem, or pursuing an opportunity, then you're likely to be able to sustain through the ups and downs of that transformation. Because you guys know this better than me, no transformation is a straight line, and it's not going to be a happy journey alone. And so you need to make sure there's enough buy-in so that the size of the prize keeps everybody focused on pursuing that prize through low times. Second, make sure you are biting what you're capable of. And so don't promise that you're going to reimagine that business model if you don't know that that's possible. So don't oversell yourself. That's my second recommendation. My third recommendation would be know who you are if you are a digital transformation leader. And a bit like product owners, these words can mean very different things depending on which organization you are in. I come across digital transformation leaders who are brilliant technologists in the hardcore sense. So they'll set up an open API ecosystem. Nothing wrong with it. That is digital transformation. But that is not pursuing a business outcome, which is an enabler to a business outcome. So know whether you are a deep technologist or you are a digital transformation person who can reimagine how that business is done. Which one are you? Or do you have both? There are some few professionals who have the ability to straddle both dimensions. And they are in huge demand because they help bridge this conversation. It's back to my crude remote metaphor, which is most people don't understand how this thing works. They have no idea. You tell somebody in any board security is important, you go, yeah, security is really important. Do you have a web access firewall? No clue what you just said, right? And so you've got to have the ability to straddle these conversations and make technology consumable for users. And that is going to be my last piece of advice, which is as important as it is to deliver transformation, it is equally and perhaps more important to be able to communicate and engage the audience and keep them on that journey. And that's much easier said by me than actually done by you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well,
Well, hi, thanks for the opportunity. My question is in two parts. The first one is, as a regulator, you talk about ideas and trying to solve a problem. And what kind of solutions are you hoping to see out there that is not being created? Because I'm trying to start something, and there are lots of brilliant founders out there that are doing impressive things. So it kind of feels like there's a lot of competition. And secondly, ChatGPT. It's not perfect. No AI is perfect. There's some biases within the system. And in what way are you looking to regulate the AI? Are you thinking of in terms of finance, where you have auditors who check for biases and things like that? What's your ideas?
Yeah, so first, a bit of clarification to say BCS is not a regulator, as several of you will know. We absolutely offer advice to regulators on what should be the regulation in our point of view. And that point of view gains wide traction with governments around the world because we come from an independent space with no commercial bias and depth of subject matter expertise. The combination of the two gives us credibility, which is what gives us currency in those conversations. But in the spirit of answering your question, I'd say it is important that if you are as an entrepreneur starting out and looking at competition and saying there's plenty of competition, you look at something that has to be unique about what you are taking out into the market. Now, it may be no new technologies and no new innovation. It may be just that you are brilliant at providing this service. I know plenty of entrepreneurs who have set up consulting firms and who have set up IT service firms. They're not selling any whiz-bang new innovation. They're just brilliant. And so property agents, restaurants hire them to run their tech and their tills. No great shakes of innovation. It's just the service is brilliant. So it doesn't really matter what it is, but it has to be something that you're brilliant at doing. And that is very, very important to set yourself out, because the market is competitive. You're absolutely right. But I'm a firm believer that human creativity and the ability to achieve something, if you have the will, you are determined to pursue it, knows no boundaries. Luck plays a part, but I'm sure you are as lucky as anybody else. And the second question you asked about ChatGPT, of course, regulation is necessary for AI and ethics and machine learning. And it will come. At present, my personal view is AI ethics regulation has some good boundary tramlines that are being debated, both in the European continent as well as in the US, and there's good progress being made. I'd like to see a bit more progress made on the innovation front at present so that we can catch up. At present, Google has sounded what is described in the media as a red alert, because ChatGPT it could replace Google it as a verb. Not that it's a catchy word, I grant you that, Somebody needs to work on the marketing of that. But you can see how with context responses to search is a better outcome than just plain Boolean search. Which is why in Google there's a red alert. They've got to catch up and get ahead. Otherwise, they could be history if they don't get ahead very quickly. And so we need more innovation to happen at present. GPT-4 models need to come in. DALL-E has come in. We need more generative models to kick in. We need more data to be available, which is wide spectrum data, so that we can train these generative models with a wide spectrum. We also, I suspect, are going to see tailoring of services. Look, the reality with human beings is we are culturally very different in Japan to Brazil. I'll avoid the cultural differences between different nations of the United Kingdom to avoid a controversy. Just imagine Brazil and Japan. Everybody would readily agree that they're culturally very different. So if you're going to have an artificially interactive robot that is going to provide social care to an 80-year-old Brazilian, it will need to learn cultural nuances of being in the Brazilian culture, which are different from being in the Japanese culture. Ethics means something very different. What is acceptable socially is very different in these different cultures. And so we are in the infancy of exploring what machine learning and AI can do, and innovation needs acceleration at present.
So just, I was wondering, so you brought up really good important topics, starting from catching up and in a way leapfrogging, right? I was wondering, like speaking of those countries that are kind of catching up, do you think some certain countries, including China, India, they will in the nearest future leapfrog all of these knowledges that are currently available and are mostly established in the US by also launching those type of technologies, but within their scope, I mean not scope, but landscape rather?
I think so. I think there's both. I could make the case both ways. So if we look at long-term institutional innovation, like my DARPA example, that takes time to create an ecosystem that cuts across industries. And that can't be set up in 5 years in any new country. And so there are some institutional competitive advantages that US has. There are some institutional competitive advantages that UK has in several industries and sectors. It's because the domain expertise and the ability to apply technology into that domain is ahead. There's some institutionalized acceleration that exists in, say, for example, Germany with mid-enterprises and manufacturing. That's a competitive advantage in Germany. Design is a competitive advantage in Italy. And some of the best designers in Italy are of Japanese origin. Who said leather was a unique thing that only came out of Italy? Why is it that shoes out of Italy command twice the price? Why is it that clothes out of Italy command twice the price? It's not like Italy has some unique raw material to it. They have a competitive advantage in design. And so some of those domains are competitive advantages of different industries. So I can make the case that they have a head start at innovation in those spaces where they have a competitive advantage. Equally, on the other side, you can make the case for blank sheet of paper and acceleration is going to happen. A great example is 5G networks in India. I was a few weeks back traveling across Bhutan in India on holiday, and you could experience that 5G network. It was priced at 1/5 the price I pay in UK, and I had per day a limit of 10 GB data usage at 1/5 the price I pay in UK for a 10 GB per month mobile. subscription. And it is, by the way, here was my eye-opening experience, which is, I was sailing up a river, and there were fishermen fishing. And these fishermen were not rich. They did not have a house. They were living on the side of the river. But one of them had 2 mobile phones in his pocket. And so there is leapfrogging that is happening because they don't have the 2G and 3G infrastructure that they needed to replace and monetize before they got to 5G. They leapfrogged. Payment ecosystems in China and India. WeChat and its ecosystem in China is absolutely leapfrogging and ahead of anything we have in Europe or in US. And so I think you can make a case both ways.
Can I ask an additional question? Speaking of those, follow-up, brother. Yeah.
Okay, let's get you follow up, and then we're trying to go back to Magnum.
So you were talking about this 5G in India. So as far as I know, there's a company that provided free internet, and therefore kind of created a huge client base, and it was free for a certain period of time, and then right now it's the only company that provides 5G, if I'm not wrong. Is that the case in India?
Not true. Not true. And this is the power of competitive markets. So of course, if you want to capture market share rapidly, you're going to offer your product for free. That has been tried in many industries, and in software, we've seen that many, many times. But no, I think the power of competitive markets spurs innovation. And telecom in India is a very competitive marketplace with lots of providers, and that you have great value for money for the consumers. I love competition because as a consumer, that means you get to try new things, and everybody's hungry for your custom, which is fantastic.
But terrible for founders.
Brilliant for founders because if they pursue that innovation, they have the opportunity to leverage platforms. I'll give you an example. Imagine if you were trying to set up Airbnb before a mobile phone or an app store existed. Not possible. But when you are setting up Airbnb, you don't have to invest in mobile infrastructure. You don't have to do that. That was done for you. You don't have to invest in app stores. That was all done for you. So you can ride some of these waves on top. It's about finding something that you think differentiates you, and it's about pursuing what you believe in through good and bad times. And that's what makes entrepreneurs wildly successful. Not every entrepreneur is successful, but that's a risk you take.
Right. Just going to go with the question online.
We're going to try to bring Magnus in again.
Hello?
Hi,
Yes,
Magnus.
we can hear you now.
You can hear me. Fantastic. Okay, this is harking back a bit in the talk. It's really around BCS's role in fostering standards and kind of training competencies and things like that. So my question is, there seems to be a trend where commercial organizations are kind of doing a bit of a land grab around things like agile and organizational transformation. It's not a new thing. I mean, there's been loads of these, but I'll just pluck out one, which is quite big at the moment, and that's a proprietary framework like SAFE. And they've got a whole ecosystem around it. But what they've actually done is, apart from structuring a kind of an approach, they've also folded in quite a lot of open source or academic theory, empiric best practice that's come out of the industry, and then folded and marketed as a proprietary framework. I've been around long enough to know Agile isn't new, so it's kind of slightly worrying trend that something like this is becoming so proprietary. What is BCS's role around trying to keep things fostered as kind of open? and not proprietary.
Well, first of all, BCS has pioneered, as you would know, Magnus, the open sourcing of capabilities that we create. The career progression framework is an example of something that we open sourced. But the fundamental problem that exists is organizations know that they are in an existential crisis. It doesn't matter what business you're in an existential crisis unless you know how to digitalize and adopt agile methods to incrementally drive that transformation. But they don't know how to do it. And so naturally they're looking for a tried and tested way. There's a vacuum that's being created, which has been filled by frameworks like SAFe. And of course, where there is a need, there is an entrepreneur with a solution who makes money out of that need. And that's what is happening. And there is the need for organizations like BCS Magnus, to the implied intent of your question, to create an open standard that has no bias, no commercial bias, and becomes the standard for the world to adopt. I think we need to go there, just like we did with career progression frameworks. We need to go there with agile frameworks. There are specialist groups that are making good progress across BCS, and I would encourage you to team up with those and pursue what you're suggesting, because I think the world is better off having a non-commercially incentivized framework which brings best practice together and openly shares it, because that is what will make IT good for society. So Magnus, I'm going to pick this up with Rashik as well, the CEO of BCS, and I encourage you to pursue it as well as a member of BCS.
Thank you.
We have Ashok on the screen as well.
Ashok, can you unmute yourself?
Hello, Mayank. A question about social media. Obviously, it's very popular. Is it time now to actually have some sort of authority, independent authority, to guide to actually, before it can be published, any articles can be published, any messages can be published, and this would mean using AI. And would this also involve somebody else keeping an eye on censorship in each country or for each country?
Big question. I'll start by saying the time to tame social media is behind us. Look, I watch my daughter's friends use Be Real. And if you haven't used it, I encourage you to experiment with it. It pings you at a particular point in time, and whatever you are doing, it takes the picture both ways, both yours as well as the other side. And there are so many of these that the next generation is posting up there. Now, that's not natural behavior for me, I'll be honest, and to share my life and post it in its entirety for hundreds of people to see. But that's totally natural behavior for the next generation. And people like me need to recognize the fact that I have grown up in a world where sharing openly and learning from networks was not as accessible as it is for the next generation. The next generation doesn't expect to pay to learn. The next generation learns by being on TikTok. And that is a different way the next generation is growing up. And so social media is here. The time to tame it is behind us. It's widely used, and it's the way people consume content and connect up with each other in the next generation. People like me have no choice to get on it and to get comfortable with it, and that's what I attempt to do. My second observation would be a credible information is a challenge for mankind. First, it's a challenge because there's no right or wrong answer. Because what is right is a point of view, fundamentally, if you get deep enough about it. And so if you believe in freedom of speech, then you've got to open up to yourself to all rights of view, because who is any one person to decide what is the right point of view? So you can make that argument on one side. On the other side, disinformation is weaponized, as we have seen in the Ukraine war. It is a weapon. And the social media platforms have a responsibility to actually not allow their platforms to become a disinformation and weaponization platform. And so where is the middle ground in this conversation? Well, as you think about that, I'd offer you one more thought, which is, even if you park disinformation, what we are seeing and consuming is limited by our ability as human beings to consume. How many articles do you think you read in a day? 10? 100? How many do you think exist in the world? And so the 10 or 100 things that you're reading are being chosen by an algorithm to show to you. And so we are living in a dystopian world where algorithms shape our outlook and our way of thinking, because those algorithms are choosing to give us the 100 articles that we can consume in a day. And most of us don't consume 100 articles. And I am a strong proponent of exercise human choice. Click on a few things that are not algorithmically presented to you. Explore DuckDuckGo as your browser, so that you're not living in a bubble or which is presented by an algorithm. We were talking earlier, in the last day, the founders of Instagram have launched a new app called Artifact, which I've not checked out, so it's not a recommendation. I haven't used it yet, but its basic premise is to take you out of the bubble. And so there is a problem. There is no easy or right answer to the problem, but it's easy to see what the unintended consequence of social media platforms is, especially when they're weaponized or they're used for mass campaigns to actually overwhelm a public view. There's enough. Just give you a little bit of optimism on that challenge, which is there's enough hope in that this is a competitive market. Facebook used to have a monopoly in this market, no longer do. There's enough competitive choices and options. There's enough controversies happening around Twitter, if you're a Twitter user, to use it or not use it. And all of this offers us as consumers the choice and the market the opportunity to actually mature and get better. So, Ashok, I'm not sure I answered your question, but I hopefully shared my view of the problem with you.
Yes, I think that's interesting ideas there. But what I think is that it's always going to be a challenge, and it's something we need to evaluate as we go along, how that evolves. And I think it's still evolving. Would you agree that it's still evolving?
I totally agree. But the beauty of social media platforms is all established media is also there. Now, if you think BBC is good and reliable, you'll find BBC on social media as well. So subscribe to it. If you think BBC is not reliable and you subscribe to something else, well, who am I to say your point of view is right or wrong? It's your choice.
We need a little more of education on where to find the source of the information. We are almost 2 minutes to 8. How much time do we have? Do we have time for one more question?
We've cleared the questions online, so
I have one more question in the room, and I think we can.
I wanted to ask, you mentioned a bit about your outside curricular work and taught students. Me being an ex-assistant teacher before I changed to my law degree, I still do work for the DFE. In terms of UK being dominant in certain sectors, we've seen just after GCSE level results that even though there was COVID and whatnot, the technology that was being offered in schools was to a good standard in terms of remote work. Is that somewhere you see UK or the government or the Department of Education working with ICT sector in terms of launching out and actually selling that as a product? But they've done in the past year at the schools in India and China.
Interesting question. I'll do this in two parts. I'll answer your pointed question and then broaden the conversation to say, are there technology platforms here that are readily exportable to other countries? The fundamental thing that has matured in markets like UK and US as well is delivering content with safety for children. The combination of the two is critically necessary in education, especially if you're talking about early years. And that has been a maturing journey for schools and school ecosystems, security, privacy, making sure that children are protected from the content that is appropriate for their age is quite mature in our world. And that certainly is of interest to other countries and is not as mature in some of the fast-growing economies of the world. So that would be an issue. And entrepreneurs pursue opportunities, as we know from entrepreneurs around us. And so you will find startups pursuing that, and you'll find startups taking that out. All you have to do is Google one of those propositions and you'll find them. I don't want to plug any one of them. But more generally, if I talk about technology and technology in education for early years, it's debatable whether having maths as an education subject is a good thing or not, as our Prime Minister wants to do at present. But if wishes were horses and anyone could ride them, and I could ride any horse, I'd like to make computing and coding a mandatory skill for every student. Because imagine a country where every student, just like how we all have math skills, every student has got basic coding skills. Because scripting languages are not complicated. And they're fun. You can construct games. And why not? And the analytical, logical thinking and the ability to create solutions is far easier today than it was in the past. You don't need to overcome barriers like the capital investment needed to set up infrastructure before you start building a solution on top. You can pay a few quid and set up a cloud hosted app and get going on it. And I think that good schools are beginning to take that curriculum in. I would hope that sooner rather than later that is mandatory for every child in the UK, because that's going to create a competitive advantage for the next two generations for our country. On that note, thank you very much for a good interactive conversation. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I've enjoyed the wide variety of topics that we've talked about today. Have a nice evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.